In the previous chapter, we talked about the lean analytics approach together with your business model DNA and how to use the management dashboard to go towards your goal as fast and as efficient as you can. In this chapter, I would love to show you that you can use this kind of approach to convince yourself as well as investors in an early stage that your business might work and can be successful. How does this work? Let's imagine you follow this approach and you're using the management dashboard and you figured out your business model DNA, you figured out what are your key metrics towards your goal and what are the current values of your goal metrics. Let's imagine you are the team of this startup with this example here, with this B2C example, where we have already achieved some progress. So we achieved within the last X months to lower the customer acquisition cost from 200 to 100, and we increased the customer lifetime value from 17 years 50 to 20, and our goal is to get profitable. So let's imagine that's the current status. And now you want to convince yourself as a team that you might be able to get profitable, as well as you might want to convince an investor that you might get profitable, that this is possible. So how can you use the management dashboard and this lean analytics approach with the business model DNA to convince yourself? This works as follows. So to get profitable, you still need to lower the customer acquisition cost, and you still need to increase the customer lifetime value. Everything you can do is using the triggers and sliders, so the metrics of your business model DNA, especially the ones which have the biggest impact. So what you need to do is to figure out what future activities might result in that you are improving your goal metrics. So what you need to do is, for each metric of the business model DNA, figure out one or more activities you need to do to improve the metric value in order to go towards your goal. Because if you improve the metric value, then also the goal metrics will be improved. So I make some examples. Let's start with the click costs here for the marketing channel. One activity you can do is a so-called keyword analysis. You can try to figure out whether Google AdWords might be better suited to approach your target audience. So, and this activity might have a duration, this activity might have actors, this activity might have at least a rough estimation of costs and expenses, and this activity might have an estimated result. So I just say some random numbers. Let's imagine the keyword analysis takes 2 weeks, the price tag is 5,000 euros, and you are working together with an external agency, and the agency thinks upfront that they can lower the cost per click price by at least 30%. So this is just one example of an activity, how you could change the customer acquisition cost, how you can improve the metric, which is the cost per click price here. Let's look at the next metric, the conversion rate from visiting the website towards free registration, which is 10% at the moment. What activities could you do in the future to improve this metric value? For example, you could decide to implement a new landing page with explanation videos, or you could say, I improve the explanation of the value propositions and I maybe very visually explain in 3 steps for the potential customers and website visitors what the value propositions are, and so on and so forth. Or I can start developing a responsive website which is running smoothly on mobile devices, so the conversion rate for mobile users might be higher. and so on and so forth. So you could create ideas what to do to improve the conversion rate. Let's imagine just some random ideas. You decide to implement more explanation videos, you want to implement responsive design, or you want to work together with some external marketing agencies to improve the website. And for some of the features you want to implement, you might need to hire a front-end developer. Yeah? And this is again an activity with actors, maybe this new front-end developer, maybe the agency. There might be an estimation of the duration, maybe this takes 3 months to build a new website version, and then you also estimate costs. Might be the salary for the front-end developer, might be the expenses you have for the agency. The next metric you could improve is the conversion rate from free registered users to premium user. What could you do? You already learned from your customer base they are missing features and content A and B. So you could start developing A and B. Maybe you need to hire more people to do so, and or you need to work with external people like agencies and freelancers to implement A and B, and so on and so forth. Again, this is an example activity with a duration, with actors, with an estimated result. And if you implement A and B, then you hope that the conversion rate goes up from 10 to 12%, let's say. The next metric would be the average subscription duration. Maybe you learned already, because you did some questionnaires and surveys, you learned that people are missing functionality in content C and D, and that's why they cancel that early. So the activity could be implement C and D. And therefore you need to hire people or work together with external people and so on and so forth. It's another example for an activity. For the metric margin, you can hire an agency maybe for figuring out the right pricing for your target group and your products. And they are very hopeful to find the right price tag which is higher than at the moment, and they are really optimistic to increase the margin. So what I wanted to say is, if you want to convince yourself that you can get profitable, you need to figure out what metric values have to be improved with what activities, and what are the costs and the durations and the resources needed to do these activities. And if you sum up these activities in the duration as well as in the expenses, you better know what amount of financing you need to be able to proceed here. So you might find out what financing needs are needed to be able to do the activities. So that's why you talk to investors, or you find out you can actually do the activities with your own resources, with your own budget and your own human resources so far. So it's about convincing yourself as well as the investor. And now the important part is the metric values you're assuming you might be able to achieve with these activities, if they are not above any industry benchmarks, if they're within the normal range, then it's very hard for yourself as well as for investors to not believe that you can achieve that goal. I very often compare this with a court case, let's say, where you need to collect a lot of evidences until the amount of evidences is enough to convince the judge to say, yes, based on the evidences, I believe that someone committed the crime. The same here, there will be hopefully enough evidence that you yourself and your team is saying, I believe this is possible, and or the investor is saying, based on this evidence, I really believe this will be possible. That's the main idea here. And if you look at the actions, the activities you need to do, they're normally part of the following 3 strategies. The first one is the marketing and sales strategy. The second one is the product release planning or the product strategy. So what product features in which order. And then the last one is the human resources strategy or planning. So what people do you need to hire, what are external partners, and so on and so forth. So to sum it up, please find out what activities you need to do to improve your metric values in order to improve the goal metrics. Yeah, and then write down the activities and figure out what might be the expenses and the durations. And then check, this is the last step, check whether the metric values you need to achieve your goal are really doable or whether they are beyond any industry benchmark. This is the best way, in my opinion, to convince yourself as well as the investor on a very fact-based approach. Obviously, this is not the only thing you need to do to convince an investor and yourself, but this should be a big part of the strategy, how to be sure you can achieve your goal. Another tool to convince yourself as well as investors in an early stage or even in a later stage is a technique I call calculating backwards. What does this mean? Remember, at one of the very first chapters of this masterclass, you learned that a business model has a so-called business model mechanism, which was the process how you convert potential customer segments via marketing and sales, your conversion steps, your products and services and related revenue models into revenues and profit. And the calculation backwards approach works exactly with that approach, but the other way around. That means we start setting a goal, let's say a specific amount of revenues you want to achieve in the future, and then we calculate the steps, the process steps or the mechanism steps of the business model mechanism backwards. And then we check whether the calculation sounds realistic or not. This is done by a lot of experienced entrepreneurs as well as investors, even during a pitch event. If people are on stage talking about their business model, then this calculation is very often done by the investors in the audience. So that's why you should know about this technique and also use it for yourself in an early stage to figure out whether your business model might make sense or not. How does this work in detail? So the first step is that you define a goal. This is related to growth and or to getting profitable. So in the case of growth, you would say you want to achieve, let's say, 1,000 customers, or you want to achieve 100,000 revenues per month, or any other goal related to growth. In case of getting profitable, the goal would be, or the goal definition would be, when is your break even? When do you achieve earning more than you're spending? So, and I will show you two examples now, and with these examples I explain how it works. So remember the two examples from the previous chapters. One was a B2C example and the other one was a B2B example. Let's start with the B2C case. You remember this was this social community platform for consumers, and they had the subscription model, and the main acquisition channel was Facebook advertisement. So I asked the team, what's your goal? They told me getting profitable. I asked, when do you want to get profitable? When is your break even? When do you reach the break even? And they told me, let's say after 3 years in month number 36. And then I asked, what is, according to your plan so far, what are the expenses in this month number 36? So what do you need to pay all the salaries? What do you need to pay the infrastructure like the office and so on and so forth? What do you need to pay for the marketing budget and so on and so forth? So they told me 150,000 euros per month. So to reach break even, we need a margin of 150,000 euros in that month to cover all the costs. So the goal for the calculating backwards approach would be, you start with 150,000 euros as goal, and now we calculate backwards. So what does this mean for the steps before? Okay, let's start. If you want to achieve 150,000 euros margin, the money has to come from the active customer base, so the active subscribers. So you might remember that the margin per subscriber was 5 euros per month. So to achieve 150,000 euros margin in total, you need 30,000 active subscribers within this month. Sounds a lot, but this is the first step of calculating backwards. So where are the subscribers are coming from? What was the step before becoming a subscriber? This was being a free user. And the conversion rate from being a free user to subscribing is 10%. So that means for 30,000 paying subscribers, you need to have at least 300,000 free users. Why at least? Because some of the subscribers might cancel in between, so you need to have at least 300,000 free users. So sounds a lot already, and this is not the end of the calculating backwards algorithm. So what was the step before getting a free registered user? This was you had been a website visitor because of clicking on a Facebook advertisement banner. So the cost per click was €1 and the conversion rate from visiting the website to being a free registered user was 5%. So to get 300,000 free users, you need to have 20 times more visitors on the website, and so 20 times more clicks on the Facebook advertisement banner. 20 times 300,000 is 6 million. So you need to have 6 million unique visitors on your website as well as 6 million clicks on your advertisement banner. On top, you need to check whether your target audience is big enough. So let's imagine, we talked about it in chapter 2, you need to find out the total addressable market size of your target group, of your customer segment. Let's imagine the customer segment has a total addressable market of 1 million users in your specific market, but you need 6 million unique visitors on your website from that target group, then there will be a big problem. The second example is the B2B case from the previous chapters. So remember, there was this project management tool, there was this guy on the phone calling potential company clients to convince them to check out the free trial version, and then after the free trial there was a subscription model for companies. So I also asked the team, what is your goal? And then we tried to calculate backwards. They told me they want to get profitable as well. So I asked, when do you want to achieve that goal? They told me also approximately after 3 years. So I asked again, what are the costs, the expenses you expect for month number 36? So based on the assumptions, how big the team is, what the infrastructure costs might be, and so on and so forth. And they told me, let's say 50,000 euros are the expenses per month, because they did not need too much marketing budget. It's mainly salary for the small team and some infrastructure costs. So, okay, let's calculate backwards. We start with 50,000 euros margin per month. This is the amount of margin we need to achieve in month number 36 to reach profitability. Now we calculate backwards. So to get 50,000 euros margin per month, the money has to come from the active company subscribers. You might remember that the margin per subscriber was 100 euros per month. So to achieve 50,000 margin, you need 500 companies which are subscribed within your subscription model. So that means 500 companies are your customer. This sounds maybe like a low number, but that are companies. It depends on whether they are small companies or big corporates. 500 can be a lot or not too much, but it sounds a lot to me at least. And let's continue to calculate backwards. Where are the paying customers are coming from? The step before was checking out the free trial version. So, and the ratio from free trial version to subscribing was 10%. So to have 500 company customers, you need to have at least 5,000 free trials. So 5,000 companies are checking out your free trial. Sounds already a little bit more. So where are they coming from? They are coming from this guy who called them and tried to convince them on the phone to check out the free trial version. The success rate was 5%. Calculating backwards to achieve 5,000 free trials, the guy on the phone needs to call 100,000 companies. This would take him 500 months. And you might remember that you need to spend 400 euros per free trial. So we talk about 2 million free trial costs. And to do so, it's harder even. Let's imagine the 100,000 is the target group size. And let's imagine you need to approach marketing agencies in Germany. And there might be just 10,000, I don't know, but let's imagine it's 10,000. Then again, the total addressable market is lower than the number of companies the guy on the phone needs to call. Again, there might be a problem. So that means in both examples, it looks sporty. It does not mean it's not possible, but obviously you need to change some numbers, some metrics before you get successful. And this is just a rough check whether with your current numbers you can achieve your goal or not. And since it's easy to do and fast to do, I recommend to do so, and be aware of that a lot of experienced entrepreneurs, especially also investors, do this kind of calculation while you're pitching. So please get familiar with this technique. The exercise for this chapter includes checking out the activities you need to do to improve the metric values of your business model DNA in order to achieve your goals. What does this mean? Check your business model DNA, and for each metric, figure out activities in the future which are helping to improve the value of that metric. So especially the metrics which have a big impact on your goals. It might be getting profitable or strong growth. So for each metric, but at least and especially for the ones with a big impact, please list possible activities with the actors, with an estimated duration, with estimated expenses and estimated results in order to improve the metric value. And please write them down, especially in the different categories like marketing and sales activities, product release plan activities, so you develop new features or new products, and what activities do you want to do to change or to optimize your revenue models and or your pricing and or your margin. And for all these activities, please figure out the expenses and also the human resources which are needed internally and or externally. That's the first part of the exercise. The second part of the exercise is please perform a backwards calculation. What does this mean? Please define a goal. Maybe you want to get profitable within 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. And then figure out what might be the expenses and the costs you need to cover with your margin, and then perform the backwards calculation, and or define a growth goal that you want to achieve a specific number of customers or revenues or units which are sold and so on and so forth, and also calculate backwards what does this mean for the different steps which had been before the last step that you earned the margin. And please figure out whether your scenario backwards calculation shows you it sounds realistic or not. And if it's not sounding realistic, don't panic. It's just a normal situation in an early stage. But then you figure out very, very fast what are the metric values you need to change with your activities in order to be able to achieve your goal.